Dear friends, I am back with one more poem from T.S.Eliot, that is Preludes, Preludes. But don't confuse, it is Preludes, not the Prelude, the Prelude, Prelude, the Prelude by our nature poet William Wordsworth, that he composed in the year 1805 but published posthumously by his wife Mary Hutchinson. So this is Preludes, a combination of four poems. Two T.S. Eliot wrote when he was a student at Harvard, maybe in the year 1909. And the third he wrote, probably he was in Paris. And the fourth back again in Harvard. He wrote all these four parts from 1909 to 1911 in his early 20s, when the world was just standing at the verge of that devastating World War I. Here T.S. Eliot actually describes that world, that transition period that began with the end, you can say that, with the end of the Victorian age in 1901. How the world was shifting from 19th to 20th century, and how with the shift literature was also undergoing a kind of a change. Literature was no longer the literature it was in 19th century, 18th century, 17th century. Poetry was absolutely different. And we can say that it was all because of that modernism movement, because Victorian age had come to an end, giving way or paving way for the modern world, 20th century literature. And 20th century was absolutely different, all because of the rapid growth of industrialization, the rapid growth of modernization and urbanization that paved way for the metropolis. How large number of the people were leaving countrysides and shifting to London, settling in London. How London had started becoming messy, how London had been littered, how this transition, how this shift from the countryside to the city, to the town, brought a change, brought a complete change of how this took the man away from the nature, how the scenario was different, how that nature sustained romantics, and how this 20th century gave a different kind of approach of thinking, approach of understanding, approach of perception to these modern writers like T.S. Eliot and so many others. See how Eliot's this poem is different from conventional poems, conventional literature, poems of William Wordsworth, Shelley, Keats, so on and so forth. How does he make use of his objective correlative? How does he give a set of objects, a set of images that actually convey the meaning of the speaker, meaning of the poet? How does the speaker of the poem, how is the speaker of the poem is here absent, and how the speaker is almost everywhere in the poems of William Wordsworth? How different the approach of the 20th century poet like T.S.Eliot, different from the approach of the Romantics, Victorians, Elizabethans. What does actually Eliot try to convey? What does actually the modern try to convey? That fragmentation, that loss, that mess, that complication, that problem. Eliot does not glorify London, does not glorify Londoners, does not glorify city life, but instead he portrays the dirt, portrays the ugliness. He shows the ugliness of the modern world, of that London. How London, to some extent, how 20th century had become absolutely de-blooded. How different the scenario was. How different the approach of the thinking of the people at that time was. How their mindset was. And to some extent, it was all because of their going far away from the countryside. No doubt at all. In 1910-11 around, London was the center of trade and commerce. London was very rich. English were almost everywhere ruling, but was there any spirituality there? Was not there a loss of religion, loss of spirituality, loss of faith, loss of emotion, loss of humanity? There was. So now let's look at this poem. I told you Preludes is a combination of 4 poems that Eliot wrote in his early 20s. In 1911, 1909 and 11. In between this, he wrote these 4 poems separately, but he published or printed them together. Why? Because how does one poem connect to the other and the other to the next? That he wants to show. And in order to understand T.S. Eliot's The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, The Hollow Man, then The Wasteland, his masterpiece, better to understand this one. So now let's look at the title of this poem, that is Preludes. Prelude, a short musical composition that is played just at the beginning of the main composition in a music show. You can say a run test that is played in a music show just to check it out. So prelude means an introductory part. So you can say that this was an introduction to T.S.Eliot's portrait of a gallery of his upcoming poems, like the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, the Wasteland, so on and so forth, that speak volume about the degeneration, about the loss of humanity, loss of emotion, loss of feelings. They speak about the boredom. They speak about the horror. They speak about the ugliness of the modern life, ugliness of that world that saw the ravages of World War I, World War II. And if the world, Europe, led into that World War I, World War II, so to some extent, that struggle for the power among the countries to some extent was responsible. So now let's look at this first prelude and understand how does the poet or the speaker of the poem, who is nowhere in the poem straightway, describe not a beautiful just a landscape of London, but the narrow and dark streets, alleys of London, replete with ugliness, replete with dirt, and replete with so many other, you can say, horrors or the signs or the symbols of that ugly 20th century or the modern world. The winter evening settles down. See, just as the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock begins with the evening, you can say that in the first two lines we have evening there. Here the poem again begins with the evening. And see, if you remember, if you have read the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, because I have already covered it line by line, you will remember that the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, the setting of the poem is early winter. And the first two lines of the poem, let's go then you and I when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon the table. So there is evening. The setting of the poem is early winter. Here the setting of the poem is again winter evening. And see the evening, how Eliot's evening is different from Wordsworth's evening, Romantic's evening, Victorian's evening, Elizabethan's evening. Their evening beautiful, pleasant, loving, so romantic. And here his evening so different, to some extent so ugly, to some extent reminds or gives a peep to the loneliness and loss that the 20th century man had, you can say, experienced. See this. The winter evening settles down. So now here the winter evening is just coming. Just here the winter evening, here the evening is Here the darkness is growing, and with the growing and with this darkness coming up, how the day is disappearing. That's transition period. See, evening is that part of the evening, or that period of the evening in between 5 to 6 is the transition period between day and night. And when this poem was written, you can say that this was also a transition period between 19th and the 20th century. How 19th century was shifting, coming to an end, paving a way for the 20th century. That transition here, through this, here he shows. So the wintry evening settles down with the smell of sticks in passageways. See, passageways, here he does not. Here we have the portrait, or here we have a picture or the image of not a wide, broad landscape, but the narrow streets. And these narrow streets are full of the smell of the sticks. This delicious food item, almost everywhere there is here the smell, the fragrance, or not we can say fragrance, the smell and the aroma of a certain food item, that is sticks. See, thus with the smell of sticks in passageway. See the beginning of the poem, how the poem just follows the pattern, or the meat follows the pattern and follows the traditional or the conventional meter. See the poem, the winter evening settles down, means iambic tetrameter is used, traditional iambic meter here T.S.Eliot has used. So the first two lines set in a very different, or set in a very traditional manner. The poem begins in a very traditional or conventional just a manner, like the poems of the Romantics, Elizabethans, even the Victorians. But all of a sudden you will see there is an abrupt break or stop, or abrupt just a break in the third line. See how small the third line becomes. 6 o'clock, here it is full stop. So see how the poem begins in a traditional and conventional manner. But T.S.Eliot, who is known for his different lifestyle of 20th century poets, modern poets, absolutely different from their writing style, all of a sudden breaks that traditional meter and gives a full stop. 6 o'clock means that transition period in between day and night. All of a sudden it happens. See this, the burnt out. See this, the burnt out ends of these smoky days. Mind the use of these adjective: gusty, sharp, grimy, withered. Just try to take a note of all that is very, very important. Showers beat, see, broken, that is very, very important. Lonely. See the adjectives. What kind of adjectives here T.S.Eliot is using, means this poem, we have in this poem that is absolutely unconventional, absolutely new, and absolutely untraditional. That that makes that just separates this poem from the conventional romantic poem, romantic age literature, Elizabethan age literature, even Victorian age literature. You see this, how different. The burnt out ends of the smoky days. See how the days are compared to the butts of the cigarette. Same kind of comparison there we find in Eliot's the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. There Eliot again compares the life of the 20th century man. Prufrock thinks that now he is just like the butt end of a cigarette. The most part of the cigarette is already what? Burnt, wasted. Means how the leftover is left in the same manner here. A little bit part of the day is left. Why? Because most part of the day is already over. Again, this image conveys something that actually the speaker does not want to convey straight away. This is what T.S.Eliot speaks about in his tradition and individual talent. And then if he says poetry is not a turning loose of emotion but an escape from emotion. But T.S. Eliot also says a poet does not write in isolation. A poet cannot cut himself or herself off his tradition, of that legacy of Wordsworth, Shakespeare, Dante, Milton. If Eliot speaks, we can say that Dante speaks, Shakespeare speaks. How does he carry that history? How does he carry that legacy of Shakespeare, legacy of Milton, legacy of those great writers of the bygone years, but in an absolutely different manner, in absolutely different, with absolutely different approach. See that? So he says the burnt out ends of these smoky days. Evening, why? Since it is actually, you see this, it is winter. So in winter, you know that the days are not so bright as the summer days are. So smoky days, not absolutely bright days, and the just only a little bit part of that smoky day is left. No hope. That P.B. Shelley has there in Ode to the Wind Ode to the West when he says in the concluding lines of the poem, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? Absolutely different. There is a hope, but here no hopes. Only the burnt out ends of the day. Burnt out ends of a smoky day left means only what is left? Only frustration, loss, alienation is left here in this modern world. He says, and a gusty shower wraps, and here see, gusty shower, see, rain. Rain stands for life. Rain stands for hope. Rain stands for purity. Rain washes away the sin, washes away the dirt, washes away all that is bad in the in the traditional poetry, in the traditional conventional literature. How water is important, how water purifies, how rain purifies from all that is bad, from all that is dirty. But here see, rain, the water, does not purify, does not wash away the sin, wash away all that is bad, but instead makes the scene and scenario worse. See that? And the gusty shower wraps, covers the grimy scraps, tidbits, leftovers like the crumbs, wrappers that people have left, or that the streets of London are all covered with. Means how the messy, how littered, how dirty the streets of the London were at that time, and how this rain that comes, instead of washing the dirt and washing the sin, instead of cleansing, it makes it more, you can say, more bad. It makes it worse. It makes it more muddy instead of cleansing or cleaning it. See how different these things, these objects have become. How different they were. They had a different function, different meaning, but now absolutely different in the 20th century. That Eliot wants to show of the withered leaves about your feet, and the withered leaves, how the leaves are here dry. You see this, how the leaves are here. How, see, and the withered leaves about your feet, withered leaves, see the dry leaves. Leaves generally, see, the fall has gone, means the autumn season has gone, paving way for the winter. It's all because of that. The streets of London, the narrow streets of London are all littered with the tidbits, crumbs, wrappers, and the leftover and the dry leaves, and all these dry leaves are coming under the feet, your feet. See, first time there is a reference of some human, or reference of the feet. Feet stands for human, part for the whole for the part. Synecdoche is used here. So first time we see a reference, or we see the presence of a human being that is totally absent almost everywhere in the poem, but here we find a reference, and only the feet is made mention. You see this, that again speaks volume about that boredom, about that frustration, and about that broken thing that the modern world was actually experiencing. So see this, the withered leaves about your feet, and newspaper from the vacant lots, the showers beat. So see how the rain is beating, and how the rain is coming heavily and making the streets of London making the streets of the London muddier, dirty, all the more. Instead of cleansing the streets of London, the rain here making it muddier. You see this on broken, and see the showers beat on broken blinds and chimney pots. Broken blinds means a kind of window with so many narrow slits, particularly for looking out. So see how the rainfall, the drops of the rain coming heavily on these just broken windows. See, the windows are broken, means these broken windows speak volume about that fragmented life of the people of the 20th century, who just stood on the verge of the first devastating war, that was the World War One. And chimney pots, so how the rain coming heavily on those broken windows and the chimney pots, and at the corner of the street, and a lonely crab horse steams, steams and stamps, stamps, and how in the corner of such kind of a narrow street, a cab horse is seen. Cabs were at that time in the beginning of the 20th century had lost their significance. Those cabs which were drawn by the horses had almost gone out of the streets of the London. So here this horse that is seen in the narrow street instead of in a wide, just a beautiful landscape, galloping is simply stamping, simply just hitting, hitting its just hooves against the ground. That shows the frustration, that shows the horse is what impatient. Why? Because the horse is unable to use its full potential, its full power. Again gives a sense of the loss of the potential and power of the 20th century people, all because of the, you can say that, all because of being part of so many just immoral acts or immoral things. You see this. So here the horse is seen, and now let's come to the last line of the first prelude, and then the lighting off the lamps, and then all of a sudden the gas lights that that feed on the gas all of a sudden light up. And since these are the gas lights, they are not going to give sufficient light, but only that amount of light that can make the scene more, you can say, bad or worse. You can say that just as in Milton's What Paradise Lost, we see that very particular part where we see the Satan with his just with his other angels just lying in the fiery lake, where there is light only to show the horror and terror of that world. Same is the case with these lights, these lamp lights, only highlight the horror, the dirt, the loss of this 20th century, instead of making the streets bright, or instead of giving the pleasant and good look of the streets of London, simply they are adding to the, they are somehow, you can say that, showing the dirt, showing the just ugliness of the streets, means of that place. So hope, dear learners, you must have enjoyed this explanation of mine of the first part of Prelude. Very soon I'll come with the second part of the Prelude.